Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my special interview with one of the Republican candidates for the United States Congress from the 3rd District of Kansas, Mr. Mike Beehler, is with us. Enjoy the interview as we touch on issues that don't only interest the voters in Kansas, but I think will interest voters throughout the country. Let's go over to the right side with Doug Billings and our interview with United States Congressional candidate Mike Beehler. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Thanks for watching on all of the podcast platforms throughout the country. We are on all of them. Please make sure that you subscribe to our program on whichever podcast platform you prefer. And every once in a while, why don't you come over to YouTube and check out the videos that we produce and put out as well. And make sure you please subscribe to the channels and to the podcast, The Right Side. Today, a big day for us here at the Right Side. We have with us Mike Beehler. Mike is a United States congressional candidate for the Republican Party, hoping to represent Kansas 3rd District. Mr. Beehler, thank you very much for being with us here on The Right Side this morning.
Hey, Doug, thank you very much. Great to be with you. I'm out here on a construction site. As you can see, I got my hard hat on, my safety vest, and I'm ready to talk.
That's awesome. I love that. You know, it's great throughout Kansas to see those construction sites. I think that, you know, over the last few months at least, they may have been a little silent. We're hoping to get those things up and flying again, aren't we?
Absolutely. Anytime you see that sky crane on the horizon, Doug, that's a good sign. That's progress. That's jobs. Jobs for Americans and jobs for Kansans, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Beehler, let's get into some of the issues that are of concern to the residents in the 3rd District of Kansas,
Sure.
and talk about your candidacy and so forth. I want to begin with, just to tee this up, with the issue of sanctity of human life and get your perspective on a couple of things. One, a few weeks ago, there were 2 states, Mississippi and Tennessee, that passed legislation that would completely ban abortion in pregnancies that were prenatally diagnosed with babies who have Down syndrome. I thought that was outstanding. What are your thoughts, and would you consider similar legislation, A, and then B, what is your overall stance on the issue of human life?
Right. Well, anytime you talk about legislation, Doug, I always like to say, I'd sure like to read it first. I'll actually be the kind of congressman, Doug, that reads legislation. I'm a quick study. I will read the legislation, and if it doesn't increase the size and scope of government, I will take a very close look at it. But when it comes to the life issue, I am ardently pro-life. I'm a pro-life champion. I'm fortunate to have been endorsed by Kansans for Life, but more importantly, I've been a member of Kansans for Life for the 25 years that I've lived in Kansas. Even prior to that, my entire adult life, I have been pro-life, working in Arizona, where I grew up in the pro-life community as an activist, and standing up for life from both ends of the spectrum, from the unborn child at conception all the way through natural death. And I even did a video town hall, Doug, on the Terry Schiavo situation. Anniversary of Terry Schiavo's death was about 15 years ago, and of course that was a big deal, where Terry Schiavo was essentially starved and dehydrated to death, while she had a loving family that was ready to take her home and love her for the rest of her natural life. So I understand the life issue. I've been involved and engaged in the life issue for probably about 40 years, and been real proud to be involved in Kansas for Life here for 25.
Excellent. With regards to reading legislation about this topic and so forth, with regards to how it may pertain to Planned Parenthood, given that the legislation looks good and sound, would you be in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood?
Well, absolutely, Doug. I want to defund. I'm not interested in spending tax dollars to kill unborn children.
Yep.
But we've been talking about that election cycle after election cycle. It's time to start
Yeah.
electing people that are actually going to say, we're going to defund Planned Parenthood. I'm sorry, this legislation's really great. It's got a lot of sweet stuff in it, but you know what? You're funding Planned Parenthood. And this has happened even recently. I'm done with that kind of legislation. If you want a congressman that's a different kind of congressman that will take the hard stance and vote no on these things very specifically. If we don't start doing that, however, when do we get the leverage to ever do anything and accomplish anything? You know, I've been following politics for my entire adult life, like I said, and I see these things decade after decade, and we make no progress, and we wonder why. We keep electing the same kinds of people to the United States Congress, and we get the same result, and we wonder why. So it's
Right.
time for people really to listen to your show and to listen to the people that you bring on and decide who is really going to make a true difference, who is really going to Congress to serve the people and not their own particular interests.
Well said. Yeah, I think that's a frustration among Republicans these days, and especially during the last few months with regards to the shutdowns and the mob activity and so forth in the streets.
Absolutely.
You know, we're wondering, where are our Republican leaders? Why, these problems are happening, and I grant you, mostly in Democratic-led and managed cities. However, it would be refreshing to see Republican leadership to get a spot on camera and start speaking out against the craziness. So,
well, you'd wonder where they are, Doug. I mean, we had Open Up Kansas when we went to protest the governor, the very liberal socialist governor that we have here in Kansas, when she took away First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights. There were no other elected Republicans there. There were no Republican candidates there other than myself to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. And we cannot continue to do this kind of thing. And of course, that cost us 300,000 jobs in Kansas and about 40 million jobs in the state, in the United States. So, and we're still paying the price for that. Businesses are suffering tremendously right now with this whole pandemic response that we've got.
Let's talk about the race here in the 3rd District. Specifically, you are running against 4 Republicans. There's Amanda Atkins, Adrian Vallejo Foster, Tom Love, and Sarah Hart Weir. Tell us what distinguishes you from them, Mr. Beehler.
Yeah, Doug, that was one of the very first questions asked of me, and it continues to be asked, and people want to know what are the differences. And I say the fundamental difference is my professional qualifications as a jobs creator and an engineer. I'm a successful businessman. This election, Doug, is coming down to socialism versus free market capitalism. And we as Republicans need to put a true free market capitalist on the ballot against Sharice Davids, who I call AOC-KC. She will embody socialism. She will embody the things that we see on television right now, the tyranny in the streets, the burning the flag, the desecration of churches, the ripping down of what these people, unfortunately, very unfortunately, stand for. That's what they represent. You can't get Joe Biden to speak against it. He has nothing really substantial to say. AOC-KC has nothing substantial to say against it. And we got to put Republicans up that are going to actually stand up for what is right. I had a woman that left me a voicemail. And she said, Mike, thank you so much for running for office. You're taking the strong stand and standing up for our flag and our Constitution and our statues and our monuments and our churches. And thank you for doing that. And it almost brought a tear to my eye, Doug. It was so sweet.
Yep, that's nice. We, with regards to the issue of socialism, I remember when President Trump gave his speech in his rally in Tulsa, one of the most striking lines I recall from that speech was he said, look, Joe Biden is a Trojan horse for socialism. I thought that was an excellent line and a scary one also at the same time. I can't remember the last time I've seen, as you say, AOC of KC. She's an absentee leader. I've never seen her on TV, and she just doesn't seem to be present. I'm sure she's probably hanging out with her friend Quentin Lewis across the state line. But would your intent be seen and heard and accessible to the people of the 3rd District?
Yeah, I will be the most visible congressman you probably have ever seen. I will be in the district on a regular basis. I'll be on the radio. I'll be on programs like this. I will be at events. I'll be listening to people. You know, at the end of the day, Doug, I love people. I want to engage with people. I want to talk to people about what's on their mind and what their concerns are. So you better believe I will, and I'll be very communicative. I think you'll find one thing about Mike Beehler, Doug, is I'm open and transparent and communicative, and being open and transparent and being a really authentically interested in people, I think is something that the voters will recognize. I think, obviously we have to win a primary election coming up on August the 4th, but getting into that general election, there'll be a lot of people that outside the Republican Party, independents in particular. We have 30% independents in this district. A lot of those independents and even some of those Democrats, some of those Democrats, Doug, don't like what they see on television right now either. Yeah. That's not the Democratic Party.
Right.
And they don't like that. And they're going to love what I have to say, because I'm going to have hope. I'm going to have vision for the future. I'm going to have proven ability to do things. I've created these jobs, thousands of jobs across America and right here in Kansas, and people are going to appreciate that. And again, Doug, this election's coming down to socialism versus free market capitalism. The distinction will be crystal clear.
I agree. I think you're right on, and I think that, again, to piggyback off what we've heard President Trump say, and again at the Mount Rushmore speech on the eve of Independence Day, I thought it was really a magnificent speech on many levels. It was united, but the other side said, of course, it's divisive. But what we're united against is the anarchy. And wouldn't you say, from your seat in Congress, if you're elected, that you would do everything possible to align with the traditional founding principles of this republic?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm a constitutionalist at the end of the day. On my signs out there, I say I'm the constitutional conservative. If you go to my website at electmikebeehler.com, there's a whole tab on the Constitution. I cite Hillsdale College as a great example. A lot of rich resources there. You can get a free copy of the Constitution on my website through Hillsdale College. But at the end of the day, that's what I believe in. In fact, as conservatives, Doug, what are we conserving? And what we're conserving is what's left of our liberty through the Constitution. With this whole COVID situation, we've given up some First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights that, in a rather cavalier manner, rather quickly. Under the First Amendment, we gave up freedom of worship. For the first time in the history of this country, we didn't go to church on Easter Sunday. And we're still not really back at church the way we need to be. And we gave up freedom of assembly, redress of grievances. I mean, we were hard pressed to recall that governor who sorely deserves to be recalled. But under the statutes in the state, I couldn't get within 6 feet of you to collect your signature to recall her.
Right.
Freedom of the press is done okay, but our freedom of speech has been restricted as well, and certainly freedom of assembly. And then last on the Fourth Amendment, which is our rights to privacy. Our rights to privacy are being taken from us every single day by the big data companies and by the government, frankly.
Agreed. And I think that, you touch on an interesting point with regards to COVID and how it might pertain to a congressman. I know that locally, of course, the governor has most of the leverage with regards to shutdowns, quarantines, masks, the mandates and so forth. However, I'm convinced, and you mentioned Open Up Kansas earlier, I was at that rally in Topeka, and one of the topics of conversation was, look, we can't allow this, meaning the shutdowns and so forth, right, to become the template by which we react to future issues. You can get me started on the definition of a pandemic, and that's a whole nother topic, but I don't think that the COVID numbers, less than 0.5% of us have been affected. I'm still not convinced it's a pandemic in the traditional sense of the term. But from your seat in Congress, how can you help prevent shutdowns and such from becoming the template?
Okay, well, that's a great question, and I think is a very valid concern. And I will say, just to preface this answer, is that I think Greg Jarrett and Newt Gingrich are writing books right now that are going to explain to us the whole genesis of this COVID-19 situation in Wuhan, China, the early response, the short-term, and even the long-term ramifications. I will say that there is a silver lining to this dark cloud in terms of what we're learning long-term. We're learning how to work from home better. We're learning about telemedicine. We're learning how we can maybe even homeschool our children. We're certainly learning that we don't want our manufacturing base in China. And so we can start to repatriate some of that critical manufacturing base. But from a leadership position in Congress, being in Congress is all about leadership and stepping up and communicating a vision to people and good ideas to people in layman's terms that they can understand, and being honest and forthright. So we as a congressman, you can lay out, what is the situation, what's really happening here, and how can we prepare for the future. I think one of the things we have to think about, for example, is the future for our children and our grandchildren. And one of the visions that I have is repurposing that whole sunflower ammunition plant, which is privately owned, but being, publicly decommissioned right now. At some point in time, I envisioned a sustainable, smart city out there. What a great idea. What a great vision for our children and our grandchildren to aspire to. And that can be the kinds of things that we can start to point to from Congress that give people hope, that give them vision, even in a situation like this pandemic that we're in right now. People have got to look for positive things. I think in general that Americans still want the American dream. They still have a great hope and desire for the American dream. The whole theme of our campaign is equal opportunity for the American dream. Republicans and independents and Democrats still want the American dream. They do not like, Doug, what they're watching on television right now with the desecration of all things that we hold dear.
Right. Agreed. And a good segue into a question I want to ask you about the American dream as it pertains to our immigration processes in the United States. Now, I'll preface this by saying I happen to believe that the United States has one of the most generous immigration programs, if not the most generous in the
Indeed,
entire world. How do you align with President Trump on his desires to strengthen the borders? Southern one is the obvious one, but also I think we need to pay attention to Canada, the border up there, and then the overall, lottery system with visas and so forth. How do you align with him on immigration?
Yeah. So I support the president on the wall. We've got about 200 miles of wall built. I wish it was double or triple that. We need to build a physical wall, none of this virtual wall, none of this electronic wall that subsequent administrations can turn off. Essentially, we need to build a big wall and protect our low-income workers that are already here, especially when we're at 13 to 15% unemployment like we were about a month or so ago. The president now is leading us in some economic improvements. Our unemployment rates nationwide is at about 11% now, but it used to be 3%. Back in January, we were setting record lows across all segments of the workforce for unemployment. And really that gives people an equal opportunity for the American dream. So you got to build the wall. You can have a big wide gate in that wall, and at 3% unemployment, key, at 3% unemployment, if people want to come through that big wide gate, they want to become a U.S. citizen, they want to speak English, they want to assimilate, they want to be part of our country, be loyal to our country, we welcome them. We welcome the men and women that are studying at KU or K-State, and they're studying electrical engineering, and they want to stay here on an H-1B visa. At 3%, they've got to go home. At 3%, they're here. We welcome them here. We want their creativity. We want their intellect. But at 13 to 15% unemployment, they've got to go home. Yep. So I think the message to that KU student would be to tell your friends to stop voting for liberal Democrats that are going to destroy the economy in this country, have destroyed the economy in this country, and start voting for conservative, real Republicans, not these rhinos, not these Republicans in name only, that are padding their political resumes for future runs for public office, or that need a job or want a job, for life. Get some real men and women in the United States Congress that are really going to turn this country around and turn this economy around. And then, my friend from India or Pakistan, when we have 3% unemployment, you are welcome to come and help us compete in the world economy. And who are we competing against, Doug, in this world economy right now? It's China. We have got to prepare our young people and ourselves, frankly, to compete against China in the world marketplace, compete in artificial intelligence, which is a game-changing technology, compete in 3D printing and virtual reality and all the things regarding the what's called the virtual twin, and compete in the race to the moon. The Trump administration wants to take us to the moon in 2024. We're going to put the next man and the first woman on the moon in 2024. Well, we don't want to get to the moon, Doug, and find the Chinese on the dark side of the moon, like
Yeah.
Pink Floyd sang about.
You bet. You mentioned an interesting term to me, jobs for life. So let me talk about term limits. What's your opinion on term limits, and what would they look like? What would you make them look like if you had any say in the matter?
Yeah, well, so I have signed the term limits pledge. I'm 61 years old, and it's a little bit presumptuous to think that, number one, I'm going to win the primary, and then I'm going to win the general, and then what, do I own that seat? I don't own that seat. I'm going to take some really, really hard stands on Congress on really tough issues, and likely we'll get a Republican and name-only challenger, et cetera, et cetera. So I've signed the term limits pledge. I've also pledged, Doug, to donate my entire congressional salary to local charities and to science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math in our local schools, because I don't need a job. I'm running for Congress because I love my country. I turn on the TV, I watch the president get impeached and acquitted, and the Democrats come back and say, well, we're gonna find something else to impeach him on. AOC-KC is a vote for impeachment. That's it. I'm done. I'm running. Yep. And oh, by the way, we're going to spend $1 trillion on things like what's behind me, big construction projects. Now, post-COVID, we're going to spend $2 trillion. Well, why not hire a civil engineer, a professional engineer? It's a proven jobs creator with 40 years of experience. Why not have that as your congressman, as opposed to a mixed martial arts professional wrestler with a law degree? Yeah. What do we need? What do we need in Congress? We need men and women in Congress that are going to lead and are going to help this country get back. We're going to help the president, Doug, make America great again.
Good. Excellent. All right. Time for a couple of more questions, Mike, if you don't mind. So that was term limits. What about, I want to hit on balanced budgets. How important is that to you, and where in the world do we begin? I mean, we're so out of whack with our budget in this country. Where do we begin? What's your stance and opinion on all of that?
Okay, I'm done kicking the can down the road. I will not vote for continuing resolutions. If it means shutting down the government, Doug, so be it. We shut it down. The Democrats will make it extremely painful. We'll shut it down at Christmas, and we'll take away all the things that we like because they want to keep their gravy train running. I will only vote for budgets, and I will vote hopefully for a balanced budget. And that means cuts. So where do we begin? We begin by electing men and women to the United States Congress that will say what I just said, and then name the things that they're going to cut. Yep. What are you going to cut, Mike? And of course, I can list 10 things, and I have listed 10 things. The National Endowment for the Arts. We'll combine the national labs. We'll combine the FDA, the National Institute of Health, and the CDC, and make them streamlined. We'll cut the Department of Education by a third and block grant to the states. We'll stop foreign aid. We'll stop the ad council. What is the ad council? Why do we have the ad council? All these types of things that every time you say that, you alienate some constituency. But you know what? Just like in our families, just like in our small businesses, we've got to balance the budget. So until you start to elect men and women that have the courage to stand up and say that, Doug, we're going to get more of the same. I'm telling you that I am that man. I have the courage to do that. I've just named some things. I will only vote for a balanced budget. We cannot continue to print money in this country. As we have done with the CARES Act, we printed $2.2 trillion to give away, basically in universal basic income, so everybody gets a free taste of socialism before the election, and a $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street. You wonder why the stock market's going up when you turn on the TV and see the whole country in disarray and anarchy? How can the market be going up? It's because we are artificially stimulating the stock market with $4 trillion of printed money. All that means to the layman, Doug, is inflation. The true definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods, and the dollars in your pocket are being inflated away every single day. We are destroying, Doug, the future for our children and for our grandchildren. And if you and I live to another 25 to 35 years, we're destroying our future as well.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Okay, another big topic, and one that is probably, if we think the economy and the budget is a big one, what about healthcare? Where in the world do we begin to create the kind of healthcare system that we need? And by the way, what is that healthcare system?
Okay, so that's a great question, and that's a Democrats' gold mine. Every election cycle in my adult life, the Democrats have talked about healthcare, and we Republicans try to give some complex answer about programs and here's how you qualify and here's how you don't, and it goes over people's heads, And the Democrats come back and slam us every 2 years very successfully. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that Sharice Davids, also known as AOCKC, is going to give you free health care. Free. It's socialist. It is socialism on steroids. And when you get free health care, the quality is low, the access is limited, and maybe, just maybe, you and I don't get that organ transplant because our quality of life perceived by some federal caregiver is not the same as somebody that's 30 years old. That's socialism, and that's what you're going to get in your healthcare system when you vote for a Democrat. What we as Republicans need to do is make it very simple. And when you said keyword, where do we begin? We begin by restoring this economy. When we get back to 3% unemployment and a roaring economy, back like it was in January and February when, you know, the sky was the limit, the market was up, the Chiefs had won the Super Bowl, the KU was number one. I mean, life was good. We're going on spring break, and we're looking forward to high school and college graduation, and then the whole thing tanks. We got to get back to that. And when we get back to that, employers will have to compete for labor with wages and benefits. And among those benefits will be health care, including your doctor, your medical, your eye, your dental. And with that with those benefits comes competition. And competition improves quality and delivers value. I was at my doctor's office and he was giving me a pitch. I said, Mark, why are you promoting your office? He said, Mike, I'm in a competitive business. And I didn't think of his doctor's office as a competitive business. We want your business, Mike. So doctors and hospitals and insurance companies are going to do that when employers have to offer as a package of compensation and benefits a great healthcare plan. And they do that when they have to compete for labor at 3% unemployment. So the bottom line is, Doug, the bottom line, rebuild this economy. And let's get back to where we were, and that will start to solve healthcare challenges in America.
I appreciate your answers because of their specificity and the things that the specific things that you say and that you want to tackle. The time that we have today is almost over, but I want to give you a chance to give us, a summarization, a Reader's Digest version of your candidacy, why you. What you're going to bring to the table in Congress and into the 3rd District in Kansas.
Okay, well, I told you I run because I love my country. I watched what's happening to the president, and I realized, I don't want to be 80 years old, Doug, and look back at 2020 and say, boy, I woulda, coulda, shoulda. My country was on the precipice of socialism. There's anarchy in the streets right now, today, when we turn on the television. And I don't want to look back with regret. So I said, you know what? I'm going to step up. I'm going to offer all of my professional credentials, 40 years of experience in engineering, building infrastructure, 25 years at Burns & McDonnell, creating jobs, thousands of jobs across America and right here in Kansas. And that's rich experience. That's capitalism at its best. I've owned my own businesses when I worked at Tucson Electric Power Company and Hawaiian Electric Company. I've been a contractor. I've owned my small business. I've generated jobs even that way. I've grown my businesses with internal cash flow. So I know how to do that. And I want to offer that, and I want to offer a vision to the people of this 3rd Congressional District. And that vision basically is equal opportunity for the American dream. It's built around infrastructure. It's built around innovation, where I talked about being competitive, helping our children and our grandchildren prepare for the future. And then it's about inclusion. And inclusion relates to immigration, but inclusion means we offer equal opportunity for the American dream to everybody without regard to lifestyle or socioeconomic background or demographics. Everybody in America or Kansas gets an equal opportunity for the American dream. So that's the vision for the future that I offer. These are the professional credentials that I offer the voters. I am a constitutional conservative. I line up on all the big conservative issues that you care about. But more importantly, if I'm the nominee of the Republican Party, I step into that election, that general election, and I can speak with those professional credentials to the independent They may not care so much about what we can care about as conservatives, but they do care about their jobs. They do care about their country. They don't like what they see on television right now, and they want to return to a great America again. And they will vote for the president, and we will make this country great again.
Well said. I appreciate it. Mr. Beehler, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been The Right Side with Doug Billings. Today's guest, United States congressional candidate from the Republican Party in the 3rd District of Kansas, Mike Beehler. Please be informed, be a voter, and exercise those rights to vote. Mr. Beehler, once again, thank you for being with us here on The Right Side.
Thanks a lot, Doug. I appreciate it.
Okay, so long.
All the best.
Well, there you have it. Another interview, another candidate. We hope you enjoyed it. Today, we visited with Mike Beehler, a Republican candidate from Kansas' 3rd District, running for the United States Congress. Please be sure to subscribe to The Right Side with Doug Billings on all of your favorite podcast platforms, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. God bless you, and God bless the United States.